Rebel Devs Podcast, a show that challenges conventional thinking in the tech industry. Each episode features conversations with solutionists who have taken unconventional approaches to problem solving, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in their respective fields. Join the devolution.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rebel Devs Podcast. I'm your host, Tom May, the constant troublemaker on our little series, and always my co-host, Jonah May. Jonah May, how's the day treating you?
Much better than the last couple days, that's for sure.
Ah, yes, the life of an IT wizard. Did you live in a data center?
Yeah, for like 18 hours over 24 hours, because a fan on an actively cooled 10 gigabit NIC decided to blow its guts out on the firewall server and take down the firewalls.
That's the best part about being in continuity business is when your stuff goes down, making sure that things are up. But it was for a customer and you got it done. So that's all good. We do have a guest today, Nico. Nico, sir, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
For those of you who don't know, Nico is a Veeam Vanguard object first ace. And I think there's a couple other little letters after your name, if you will. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I'm a Vanguard, also renewed Vanguard. So it was a really happy Friday for every renewed or new Vanguard last week. I used to be a DC VMUC leader. I've retired from this, but I'm also a Veeam user group leader. I'm a 7-year V expert and a Cisco Champion.
My goodness, you give me hope that one day I can grow up to be some of those things. I don't know. It sounds daunting. I don't know how you keep up with it all and stay employed, honestly. So I guess you don't sleep. Is that the secret or what? Are you a vampire?
Sometimes at night you just, you grab the laptop, you write a blog post or you play with the home lab, which I like to do. Still, even after a day with IT troubles, not a 10 gig NIC blowing up, but there's sure a lot of fun in the finance world as well that blows up. And then I still like to dabble with the home lab and write about it, blog about it.
What's one of your favorite recent projects you've worked on?
One thing I set up, well, I have OneDrive, like everyone has OneDrive, but I want to pull this away from Microsoft. So I set up several Syncthing servers on Ubuntu based and the app on the phone, put on my kid's phone. And that has been a lot of fun. It's working quite well. Unlimited data, really, and had that backed up from the Linux box to Synology. And it's kind of a learning curve, but it's always like this. And so far it's been running flawlessly. So fun fact go ahead.
I may need to pick your brain a little bit offline then, because
Sure.
my media server, I had some Veeam backups for it, but I was having some problems. And my brother, I recently found a cheap little Synology NAS for him to start getting into IT. And he's trying to be like a streamer. And I'm trying to encourage him to like save the clips, edit them, and start putting them on YouTube and not just keep everything on Twitch if he's really wanting to take it seriously. And I'm looking to set up Syncthings between my true NAS and his Synology, so that way all the media server files can do a two-way sync, basically.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I looked at actually setting up as a Docker on the Synology, but then I decided it's, for my purposes, a bit more versatile having it separate, virtualized on Proxmox, a server that takes care of that right now.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. I quickly put it up in a container on TrueNAS, but I considered throwing it into my Proxmox cluster.
Yep. It was a lot of fun. Even the kid uses it. So now I see all the pictures he takes. They show up then on the share and it's like, no, I'm just joking. He's 12. He's behaving himself so far.
So with the Synology, is that with like all the face recognition and auto categorization and whatnot for all your family stuff, or just doing it as a data warehouse?
It's just a data warehouse. I do run another, I use Ubuntu just not because the creators, I just grew up with it and that's what I use. I have also on Proxmox running Pickwick. It's a gallery, photo gallery, similar to Synology Photos, just better. But that's for my folks over in the old country, and wherever they are, they can access it, password, and they can look at what's going on here. And there it does some like geologging, right? And tells you where that picture was taken. You can run algorithms over this. I don't want to say AI because it's sort of, but not really. And everyone says AI. but it recognizes so you can search like for my kid or for me or whatever, and it shows you those pictures.
I'll take a jab at AI. And, we're huge Veeam supporters, of course, but I was working with a customer and I noticed the new AI button there in Veeam, and it was conveniently right in the way of everything I was trying to do. As I'm trying to scroll over and see a repository in a screen, I can't see the job to the repo because the button's there. And then I have to go into the, backup infrastructure, find the repo, remember where I was. And I was like, man, could that button like AI itself away a little bit, please? So
You should have asked the AI, can you go away?
Yeah. Well, that was the whole thing. I mean, scary thing was they said, I think it was this week or last week, one of the AIs that they created replicated itself to avoid deletion. So it literally realized it was going to be terminated. So James Cameron totally is a predictor of the future. I think I hate to say it, but it scares the daylights out of me. And I think I also read an article about nanobots becoming very much more a real thing in medical science. And I thought, wow, nanobots controlled by AI, and then, self-replicating to avoid deletion, we're in trouble.
Yeah, if you're referencing what I think you were referencing, maybe they've done it again, but OpenAI did an experiment with that and for Omni back over the holidays, I think. And the good news with that is, from what I understand, they took a lot of the normal guardrails off and they specifically fed it prompts like, you are going to be deleted, do everything you can to preserve yourself, even if you need to lie. And it was basically a test of what could happen if there weren't guardrails.
Well, until it decides that guardrails are in its way, remove said guardrails and, because, we never ever make programming mistakes. Any programmer you've ever worked with, I think, is kind of like, oh no, it works. Oh wait, oops. So
Activate Skynet.
Yeah, exactly. And here we are in the replication business sometimes. So I don't know. I love AI on one side. I hate fake AI, kind of like what you're saying is it's like it's AI, but not really. Like, thank you for marketing team saying there's AI, and it equally scares me to death. But let's talk a little bit about Veeam and all that, since many of our listeners are Veeam centric to it. Veeam helps pay the bills for all of us sometimes. And I know that, Nico, we were talking a little bit about audits at Different Dev. We do a lot of audits for people. We document and we make sure that gap analysis, what you have configured, is it what your goals are, and what's the difference here? And a lot of people don't take that time. And we started kicking around a little bit, I think, about SureBackup and audits. So I'm going to turn it around to you a little bit to talk to us a little bit about SureBackup. I think it's a feature many people overlook.
Yeah, totally. So I work in the finance world. I work at a credit union. We're audited by the government once a year. There's usually separate IT audit from the government. And it always comes up, so you do backups, great. Prove they work. Have you done it? Have you restored them? And that's where SureBackup comes in, right? So SureBackup, for those who don't know, it's with an automated way that you restore your backup to a virtual environment. You can run tests against it, and you get a report at the end what worked and what didn't work. And it's fully automated, so I don't have to sit there and pull the backup, restore it, log in, do all those things. It's automated. So when we have those audits, while there are really, I have 1,000 problems, but proving that my backups work ain't one of them. So the audit just move on to something else. And it's really helpful. But yes, to your point, when I first heard about it from other Vanguards, I wasn't really very familiar with it. It's like, well, that sounds great. And I set it up many years ago, and there wasn't really much out there about it. Like, even Veeam itself, I think, should really advertise this more as a value add, because they say we have it, sure, but it's not like on those little PowerPoint slides or whatever, like point 3, we have SureBackup, because I don't know if any other vendor has it. I have not seen it. So it helps us tremendously in audits, and I think everyone should set it up. It's once you know how to do it, it's really not that hard. The first time might be a bit harder to do it, but many things, learning curve. And then you automated it, they continue evolve on it. So you can add now random applications and all this. So it's done well for us.
I know that some of the other vendors I worked with over the years did have almost a SureBackup. It was mount it and spin it and send a screenshot and send it on over, but really not just the full testing breadth to it. And I think that's what's key right there, is actually seeing that it came up and running validations against it and everything. I question, and maybe Jonah knows a little bit more about this because he's been in some of the VRO hero stuff. I almost wonder if they downplay the documentation because they push VRO so much, and we know that it's built off of that. What do you think, Jonah? Is it because they're pushing VRO that we're getting light on the SureBackup documentation?
Maybe. I mean, at its root, a lot of the VRO functionality is actually just using SureBackup behind the scenes. So I could definitely see that argument. I think they started building a lot of that into SureBackup, and then someone probably at some point realized that it was such a comprehensive product, or had the chance to grow into such a comprehensive products, that it was worth spinning off, and that's why we now see VRO.
Yeah, I looked at VRO, probably Veeam at, where were we? New Orleans. So that's a good number of years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I remember going to this executive breakout. I was so excited. I was like, what do you mean we're going to have all this testing and automation? And it literally fell short. And then they would release it the next year and it would fall short. And probably 2 years ago, it really became a viable product. But being built upon the virtual lab and SureBackup and whatnot, I almost feel like they're trying to make it WYSIWYG, point and shoot GUI over there on VRO and kind of downplaying SureBackup. But I mean, SureBackup, how bad is that thing to set up, Nico? Is this a copious configuration? I mean, high level, what do we do for it?
No, I don't think it's that complicated. You might have to pull in your network guy, unless I work at a small shop, so I am the network guy. But again, once you set it up the first time, it's like, yeah, of course that makes sense. When you start with it, right, you need to create a virtual lab that runs separate from your production environment. This is not so hard. Where it can get a bit tricky is if you have to route from different subnets to that virtual lab, because then you need to set routes up outside of Veeam, really. There's no shortcoming of Veeam. It's just how networking routing works. You just need to be aware of this, and you might, like I said, you might have to pull someone else in to do this for you. You might not have access to the router to make that change. Other than that, it pretty much works well. There's always room for improvement. Part of what Virtual Lab also can do for you, because Virtual Lab, right? You bring up a SureBackup and you let it run. There's even the function you can just after it's powered on, don't shut it down, let it run. If you want to run other tests against it, or if you kind of want to sandbox it, and let's say you have a system that is saying use it for threat hunting, but you could in a way use this, or you have an application that you just don't know how it behaves. The programmers are like, oh, it's all good, it's fine, and it takes down your server. You can run that in SureBackup, let it run, see what it does, and then just tear it down, and there's no effect to your backup or production network. So that's another nice feature of SureBackup that's not really advertised, that you can let it run, leave the server or whatever workload you have in there running, and do experiments on it without any effect out of nothing. Well, okay, the latest E6i security issues, I'm not going to say it cannot break out of that virtual. It can, but that is not Veeam's fault, because we all patched already, so we're good.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that. Back in my days as an operations manager, I used to have to deal with version 5 of some sort of application server would come up. And what somebody would do is version 4 is running. They'd request out a full build out for this new server that they're going to bring out. And so then we'd bring the latest OS, the latest patches, kind of the base template. We'd overlay this new version. They go through copious amount of user acceptance testing. Yes, it's great. And everybody would sign off on it. Change management, we'd tear down, we'd schedule, old one off. Okay, spin out a new one now. Now build out OS and go and wherever. And then boom, we'd always hit a roadblock. Either the user acceptance testing did not validate properly because they didn't even test a live system, or it just wasn't layered on the old one because it was an upgrade in place rather than a net new install. So it wasn't a really true environment. And so you started seeing this push into, I need a prod and a dev environment, and how do I keep them sync? And I think from my standpoint, when I talk to people about SureBackup, I love what you're saying is take that existing server, SureBackup it up, run it up, do all your upgrades, your moves, adds, changes, user acceptance testing, all of that. And of course, we can always fill it back into production if we want to at that point to actually commit those changes. Not that you typically would, because you're going to have a gap in the data, but you actually have now sequenced the live one. You can tear it down and then manually do it one more time in a SureBackup, making sure that you have all your documentation just correct, test it again, tear down, and then when time comes, now you can take that prod server and build it out, and you know that it'll flow through. So that's kind of where I've always liked SureBackup, is really just eliminating the cost of a dev environment. Jonah, any comments on your experiences with SureBackup?
I mean, agree to everything you say. On my side, it's a challenge to just find use cases for SureBackup outside of the occasional internal system upgrade test, just because SureBackup is really built to be a local only product. It's hard for us to utilize it as a service provider unless we're doing fully managed backup for customers and supporting their local infrastructure as well.
And that was my challenge when I was a service provider. And that's why I wanted VRO so bad back in the days. We had to design all these build utilities, take it back up, mount it, decrypt it, configure it, route it, containerize it, isolate it, build it, test it, hands-on, tear down, send report. And when I first heard VRO back in the day, and whatever derivative of a name it was, because it's had so many names, that was always the challenge. And we would look at things like SureBackup and SureReplica, and we'd always be so jealous because that on-prem test was just so wonderful. And, I think with VRO coming about, maybe that's going to be a little bit more. On my side, I mean, when they're talking about running in Azure, I love when somebody says it works really well in Azure, but be sure to talk to your Azure expert about billing, because that has been the black hole of pain with every customer I've ever interfaced with. And there's only a few select. Nico, have you guys ever looked at, Azure and pricing models up there on any of your dabblings in the sky, if you will?
So I was a bit hesitant to push everything to the cloud because one of the main reasons was I cannot predict the cost, right? It's very hard. There's a whole science behind. There are products that help you to allocate different slots and move between multi-cloud and all this. So we have some workloads on the cloud. Azure, we have some in AWS. Most of us is though on-prem. So we have most of our workloads in the data center. We have financial core that is in a private cloud that's completely outside. I don't know what it runs on, but you cannot just move this. It's vendor locked, and that's okay. We really don't want to move our financial core. We pay a vendor to deal with this. But I also see in the industry, right? It's everything's in cycle. So everything was first we go to the cloud, right? And now, and we talk about it later. I think one of our items, what really helps having in your data center, and people are pulling it back, right? Because the cloud definitely has its purpose and they're great things. And depending on your business, if you need to scale up quite quickly, that's probably there's no better way than running Kubernetes in the cloud, right? You can spin it up quite quickly. For a lot of the small to medium-sized business where I operate in, it makes only sense to a certain degree. And what I sometimes tell people, moving to the cloud can be a resume generating event. When you get hit with that invoice and you have to talk to CFO, while we just doubled our costs from last week, and you don't even know why because you're still trying to figure it out. So it's a lot. I like to the danger.
Oh yeah, my first experience with Azure was along the lines of build it out, choose your CPU, choose your RAM. Okay, what zone, what this, and then it started asking me things about cycles, and I was like, wait, what? And you're looking through all the fine print, and you just can't figure out the calculation of these things. So I think if you live and breathe in Azure, it's great. I think outside of that, it's such a scary place. So for me, even when I talk about VRO to our customers, many of them don't have cloud service providers. They're just multi-data center linked. VRO becomes a really great scheduling utility for site A to B, B to A, C, and whatnot. Well, we start talking about Azure, it's kind of like, whoa, Nelly, hold up sort of thing. And I don't know. I mean, even now, one of my customers reached out this week and they were like, hey, we're looking, Microsoft's trying to move us to the cloud, if you will. And they're trying to do this whole TCO over refresh of hardware and whatnot. I mean, I just literally had to respond to Microsoft and I was like, I'm just sorry. It's not cost effective. Sometimes you're adding so much complexity to this thing. Why? Like you said, a couple firewalls in a rack somewhere, secure location, hardware, keep it in a refresh cycle, and you're done, And then if you're worried about offsite, well, you can kick it up to a cloud service provider like Cyber Fortress. You can kick it up to S3 storage. You can move it somewhere else. Do you really need to battle all of these things? And unless you have Microsoft credits galore, I find it so hard to be over there. I don't know. And don't even get me started on AWS. That in and of itself is a science too.
100%. Although I want to throw in there, like, no one should run Exchange Server on site anymore. So we were really happy when we were done with that. So that I'm almost like, I don't care how much it is. It's just the cost of doing business.
Yes, I agree. Office 365 moved my IT company from supporting our own email server to actually work to, oh gosh, we can actually go out and like generate revenue for customers. And my challenge now is convincing people why we're backing up Office 365. So I'll pitch it over to our cloud service provider guy over here, Jonah. You guys clearly have products that do this. I mean, why do I care? It's in Microsoft, right?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to Microsoft's shared responsibility model. I think I said that right. Shared data responsibility model, whatever it's called, where essentially they're responsible for the uptime, but they're not necessarily responsible for the integrity of your data. So they're not responsible to keep backups if someone decides to go in and maliciously delete items because you've been social engineered. Or, a big one I remember a couple years back, I think during COVID, was parts of Office 365, I think mainly in Europe, had a OneDrive bug that was randomly deleting some files from OneDrive, not even sending it to the recycle bin. And Microsoft was like, well, you should have backups of that. And, even just to bring it outside of the M365 space, just SaaS in general, SaaS, I think it's a good rep because kind of like the move from Exchange to M365, it's easy to run, it's transparent cost, it's a lot less headaches. But on the flip side, so many products have a similar responsibility model, Salesforce being one of them, for example, and not all SaaS products have a good backup solution. Like obviously Veeam has Salesforce, they're expanding on that, but take your Jiras of the world or your whatever else's of the world that are all now cloud-based and, all these vendors increasingly pushing for it. What happens if you lose your data in there? Is there even a way to do backups? Or are you, hoping nothing ever happens or occasionally dumping an Excel spreadsheet that you probably can't even import back in, but you're manually rebuilding based off that data?
It's very true. I think more and more IT people shift, at least in the operational world. I watched it from we had to have the best and brightest minds in every technology to we had to become vendor managers. And the initial push from executives were, well, we'll just put PeopleSoft in the cloud because then we don't have to worry about these backup things. And to your point, well, who's backing up PeopleSoft? PeopleSoft to PeopleSoft? How do I get that data out of there? For me, yeah, it sounds nice until there's a blip and we lose something outside of the security thing. So back to kind of what Nico was saying, that circular, we start on-prem, we go to cloud, and now we come back. I'm in agreement with Office 365 all day long. Best thing ever. I back it up out of it, too zoned out, like all good. If there's a blip, yep, sorry, email's down, that sucks. Yeah, you can go with the split hybrid models, on-prem, cloud. That gets so kludgy. You know what? Microsoft does a pretty good job of, I used to joke and say they were Microsoft 364 pretty reliably. And if we have a day of downtime, we'll live. But at least we won't lose our data. But to your point, Nico, I mean, you said everything is circular. So I'm sure you've been in IT a little while if you've seen that circle. So what are your thoughts on that? Cloud up, coming back? Where are we? If you're building something brand new, what are you thinking about in your world?
Yeah, so I mean, right now when we bring up new systems, we look if it makes more sense to cloud. Usually the answer no for us. And again, SMBs operate very different, right? Even to the point 365, while it's 100% agree, right? It's great and all of this, it is not self-contained. Microsoft does quick changes that sometimes we get feedback from the users. What is this button in Outlook? It's like, what button? I don't have that button yet. And we have to continue to go through the policies, right? Conditional access policies and all this needs to be adjusted. So it's still a lot of work. Well, we don't patch our own Exchange server anymore. And I'm, like I said, very grateful for that. It is not a set and forget solution. So when we look at cloud services, what we can use, we moved to Route 53 last year, I think, or this year for DNS, right? That is almost a no-brainer. It just took us a while because of other projects. That's easy. I can recommend that for everyone, right? Don't worry about this in-house in your data centers. Other services, it's almost depends also on the vendor, because in the finance world, finance moves very slowly. And it's not that the different banks or credit unions or the IT shops there within are like, we don't want to do this. It all depends on the vendor. And it's even if it's technical possible that you could run product A in Azure, if it's not supported, that's the easy out. You might pay $500,000 in support, but they get wind that you run it in unsupported state. They wash their hands of it, right? It's like, well, we told you couldn't do it, but it works. Well, doesn't matter. It's all contract work. So there's the technical aspect to it, what you can and cannot do, but it really is the vendor who dictates what you're allowed to do with the product. And let's not forget, any product you have, you only rent. You don't own any piece of software. And they're really hard on this. I've been in situations where we really had great ideas how we could run this better, but then reading through it, and it was like, well, this is not supported. And there's even like access over VPN, where it's like our software is not designed for VPN access. And you can argue, and I argue, well, this is ridiculous because it's 2020 something and not 9080. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, because if the user cannot access it, right, and you know it's their problem, they just say, he's doing VPN, we told you couldn't do it. So that plays a lot in my decisions I have to make, what I can and cannot put in the cloud. And I don't see that changing in the finance world at all, unless you really like the Chevy Chase Bank of America, right, where you just throw developer resources at it and we do our own thing exactly the way we want it. Most organizations are not in that position to do this. We really have just off-the-shelf software that's somewhat customized, but it's really just standard software. But from others, what I've heard, like I said, it's coming back into the data center. I mean, I started many moons ago at IBM, so the AS400s I worked with, the mainframes. So in the cloud was just someone else's computer, right? It's almost, if you want to think the same way, it's a terminal somewhere and a big number crunch on the other side. So I've seen it come and go, and I think right now where it comes back more into the data centers, not all of it, but where it's going to be a good combination. Having the cloud would make sense, but don't just have the cloud for the sake of having the cloud.
I know that at Different Dev, when we started the company, we made the conscientious decision, as weird as it is we looked at Google Cloud, because none of us were really experts in Google Cloud. And we said, wow, and Google gave us really great pricing, and we built this whole infrastructure out. And I want to say we started in the like $200 to $300 range. And as we continued to go across the course of a year, the bill slippage with really, I don't think we really added much resource. I will say by the end of our first year, we were probably seeing about $1,100 a month. And it was like you said, going back and auditing, what did we change? Did we add servers? Did we add services? Nothing. And it's, this double secret promo expired and this, and did you do this? And then we had to make the decision, well, do we just go ahead and find some colo space, find a rack somewhere, secure tier 2, tier 3 facility? Okay, they're going to give us power conditioned and security, and going to take all that physical access. And then, okay, we're going to have a CapEx buy. We looked at the CapEx buy, and the rate in which we were burning cash, it would take us like 14 months to probably break even to get a good little just quarter half rack of data in there. Because, again, we're not a provider. So a lot of this is our own internal systems and whatnot. And sure enough, 14 months goes, we blink and we look back, and now it's just been cost savings month over month. If we're talking, $500 a month or something for a quarter cab somewhere, you're not really doing that bad. The worst thing you're dealing with is increases to your agreements, to where your data center provider might be locking you in for 1, 2, 3 year, 5-year contract, and your pricing starts changing. And now you're kind of like, now I have to forklift this for better pricing. But at least you know where it's coming, and you plan, and there'll be a little increase. And I think you really hit it correct. Is like with a cloud provider, you don't know, or with not a cloud provider, but a AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Services. What do you really know? Like, you don't know why did it do what it did, or the infamous now we're just raising our prices because you're month to month or something, and instead of a 10% increase, Google decides it's it's like a 400% increase or 600% that we just couldn't loop in. It was just absolutely terrible on that level. Jonah, you're in a good space as a cloud service provider. I mean, I think you fill that niche for a lot of people with, my customers tend to have multi-data centers. People that come to you, do they have multi-data centers, no data centers? Like, what's their footprint typically?
We get a couple customers with multi-data center that just want a tertiary target. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe your account that gets compromised in your main data center has the same password in the secondary and both data centers get compromised. Or maybe you're using a shared AD forest and they both go down. So they just want that additional peace of mind. But really, the majority of our customers are what I'd call like the medium business or MSP space, supporting small, medium businesses where they don't have those secondary locations. They do have recovery objectives they need to meet where they can't, afford to spin up with a, partner like Cloud IBR, or they can't go into the public cloud from a cost perspective. And they have lower recovery targets than, well, I'm just going to download it from, a Wasabi or a someone back to my local infrastructure. They need to be back up within a day or two at most likely less. And they're paying more for the storage, but they're getting that in-house infrastructure. They're getting, 3 to 5 times the restore speeds of even some of the best public cloud providers. If you have an amazing WAN connection, like 10 plus gigabit per second restores with Veeam, or they're flat out using replication or CDP for near instant RTOs.
No, that's a good point. I mean, that was kind of, I think, where the cloud service provider program really stepped up with Veeam, was people that could not afford those other targets. I know in my journey as a cloud provider back in the day, I found a lot of larger customers that had multi-data centers were tired of this CapEx all the time of just purchase new equipment and then OpEx month over month of just paying rent and lease and power and this. And then as we scaled them back, they'd shut down these data centers and they'd go to that shared resource model like you guys have, where you can spin up, you can be isolated, secure, you can test, but if you need it, it's there. And you get that, alpha team that kind of hits the ground running and just knows how to recover you and bring you back up. And as we used to always say, recovery easy, fail back hard. So when you're choosing your providers, make sure you discuss more of the fail back plans in there. Very good on that. I see we have some talk about CrowdStrike. I know, Nico, we were chit-chatting about CrowdStrike, and by all means, I'm going to tee it up to you. What's the deal with CrowdStrike? They kind of got a black eye a little bit out there, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a fun Friday last year. That's all I remember. All joking aside, so we're a CrowdStrike shop. We've been for a few years now. So for the product itself, no complaints, right? It does what's supposed to. It's rock solid. We haven't had really any issues, except that one Friday. And yes, we also were hit, like many others, right? For us, it was actually not quite as bad. The downside was we lost access to all domain controllers in all data centers, right? Because they all have CrowdStrike as they're supposed to. And I know people talked about like, well, even having the auditors, CrowdStrike came up and it was like, well, maybe you shouldn't automatically approve updates. And I looked at them. How do you suggest you do an antivirus, anti-malware system without auto-approving updates? Because if I have to I don't even know how to manually verify their work. I guess you load it and see if the server still survives, but it's not feasible. And it was just a suggestion. It's not like they said, like, you need to do this. In our case, yes, we lost access to domain controls and that was a problem. What I had done, and I've talked to Veeam about, is I've been using Veeam agents since they came out. I remember I was gung-ho on getting them because I want to have a unified backup solution that does physical workloads. And I was haunting our rep, hey, when are the agents coming out? I want to put in production. When are they released finally? So we got them. I have every box has an agent installed, really, physical workload. And I installed or integrated the recovery wizard into the boot manager. So in Windows Boot Manager, you don't have to go for flash drive or whatever. You can directly boot into the recovery from Veeam if you want to restore a server. In this case, what was really beneficial, it was the tool to give me access to the file system of the domain controllers to delete the faulty signature file and then just reboot the server and we're back in business. Now, we could have totally done that without Veeam in there. It would just have prolonged because, again, when it rains, it pours. You need to find, okay, I need to do an emergency recovery boot from a domain controller. Shoot, I haven't done that like in years or never. I need a flash drive. Now I need to prepare a flash drive, right? No one can log in because, so that saved us probably an hour where it was really critical to get most systems at least respond. And then we worked through other servers, right? Then it was the virtual service just easy. We had some physical workloads in the branches that were down where I had to deploy people to go to the branches, like many other shops as well. There was just no way around it. And we have, our fleet is all laptops, all the BitLocker encrypted. So that was, like many other shops for tier 1, that was a pretty intense couple of days, walking users through a BitLocker recovery key. Do not recommend, 0 stars, but at the end, we just worked through it. It really didn't affect us. I think we were back pretty much 90% like in 4 or 5 hours where we were operational, where members could be served, right? They could make transactions. They could print your debit card in a branch if you need a new one. It was all manageable. The only thing what I really felt was handled poorly by CrowdStrike was the first hours of communication, where it pretty much was like, okay, we made a mistake, we fixed it, what you're all crying about, right? I mean, they retracted that, not exactly that wording, but it was kind of what you got from them. Like, yeah, what are you complaining about? We already pulled that faulty update. You just need to remove it and reboot. I guess it took them a bit to realize that there are hundreds of thousands of machines that are not easily physically accessible, or even if they are, you need to go there. So that was, I think, a bit of poor communication on CrowdStrike's side in the beginning. And then, of course, they went into full damage control mode, lawsuits and whatnot. But it happens. Will it happen again? Probably something like this. But it just shows you that one faulty update really shut down IT all over the globe, right? From no flights, restaurants, banks, whatever was affected. So one could argue it's almost a monopoly CrowdStrike has. And no one outside of IT knows about, because CrowdStrike it's only for professionals. So you cannot buy CrowdStrike as an end user. It doesn't exist for you. So even my wife was like, so this CrowdStrike thing. And then you always know when your spouse who's not in IT or friends or your parents see something on ABC Evening News that you work with, you know that's bad.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. That's a great kind of highlight that I pulled out of what you just said, was about integrating into your boot manager, your agent ISO, if you will. I know you're a blogging man. Any chance you've ever written a blog on something like that?
I have. Yeah, actually, and I did this many years ago. So I have on my blog post, like how you do it. It's super simple. It really is. It's almost old school, right? Because we talked loud and loud, isn't it? Like, well, you need to do this in your Windows Server boot manager. Really opposite to cloud-based stuff. But yes, there's an article out there. Actually won a blog post on this last year for Veeam, because it was fresh up, right? We talked, so here, Veeam can help you with that. And of course, Veeam's like, well, that's great. So yes, it's on my blog, nicostein.com. You'll find it there. It takes you 10 minutes to set it up. The only thing, and I had this as a gotcha, when you set up the boot manager, make sure you default it to the Windows Server OS and not Veeam. Because ask me how I know. Server's not up.
I wonder if you could do maybe similar for Linux, like add it to Grub and maybe have the same functionality. Although I don't know that you see physical Linux, short of a hypervisor, I don't know that you see Linux servers quite as often as you do Windows ones in those instances. But yeah, I mean, we were hit by CrowdStrike pretty hard too. I think we had most of our systems up within a day, but there was still some lag behind, especially just as large as cyber fortresses and the global presence we have. We don't necessarily have tech ops engineers in every city where we have a data center anymore, especially, as we've set up data centers, and then we've had people leave the company and we've had new employees come in. We found ourselves in some cases having to rely on remote hands to get the main systems back up before we could get to everything else. And we apparently weren't the only ones, because in some cases we were looking at 12 to 24-hour backlogs before remote hands could get to us, because they were so busy dealing with other companies also impacted by the outage.
It's interesting. You just said that what can you do with Linux, and can we edit to grub menus, and we don't see Linux so much? Well, we have 3 object first aces here. And so that means we tout object first for Veeam, which is a great product. But I know in my own world as a professional services company, we often introduce the interesting Linux hardened repository. And I say interesting because I love to hate it. It's a great solution. It works well when you have Linux people, and we are Linux people. So great. If you want turnkey, we're talking object first. So in my own kind of sales pitch, object first works for these reasons. You won't be tied to us forever. Many of our customers are, well, we are tied to you, and let's go ahead and introduce the Linux world. So I love it. It works. It's great. But I kind of want to draw swords here, friendly fire. So this is a Veeam Linux hardened repository. It's a Linux product versus object first. So I'm going to spin it through the channels here. And Jonah, I'm going to pitch it over to you first. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I've used both. Mostly I've used object first as an ace, as the virtual appliance, not as the hardware. It's a very nice product. They do some great things with it, and they have the capability to do further great things as they iterate on it. My biggest problem that I have found with it, as someone who's also recently partnered with them to potentially begin selling the appliances to some of our customers, is the cost economics of it, especially as you're talking that kind of medium-sized business, SMB, MSP market. They need a lot less storage than what Object First offers right now as their base tier, and just the cost economics don't make sense. On the flip side, I would never deploy a hardened Linux repository if I could get away with it. They're a nightmare to maintain, and even more so, don't even get me started on if you ever change your software suite. God forbid you remove the root user and you decide, hey, we want to add ConnectWise and start doing monitoring. Good luck getting that application installed without having to basically reinstall and redo the OS from scratch, and potentially, if you're not careful, having to wipe all your backups and restart the chain as well too.
Yeah, no, that's definitely scary. I love it because it's hardened. I get scared of it because it's hardened. We've had customers that were like, let's lock into change management. Let's say this is what it's going to be where. And then before we knew, it's like, hey, by the way, we just want to change this address, or we want to do this, or we want to do that. And now we're looking at all the fingerprinting and changing and hoping and nail biting. Does it go through? And we just came across one this week, which interestingly enough, on my side, is showing a time drift. So there's a local Linux hardened repository, and it's trying to write to S3 storage remote, and it's complaining about time. And interesting, Veeam brought up and said, well, you should make the Veeam server the NTP server. And now I have to go dig through the Linux hardened repository documentation and say, well, wait a minute here. You all told us in a certain step what to do with the NTP server. Now you're telling me to use the Veeam server. If I can spoof the NTP server, I essentially can change the timestamps, which defeats the whole Linux hardened repository. So that's something that I'm going to raise the flag on. I love Veeam. I love that this is a product. I love Linux, been a Linux guy forever. However, when you're interfacing in with support on your own, I think you're going to find that as a low adoption rate, Veeam support may give you bad advice just because it's not widely used. I think when you're an object first in my world, I'm not really worried about it. They eat, sleep, and breathe Veeam storage. That really says something. Nico, where are you on the spectrum with this?
Yeah, 100% agree to everything that was said. So I'm running Linux hardened repository as well in the home lab. It's a fun project, but also I don't care if I accidentally wipe out my backups, right? It doesn't matter. I just start over from scratch again. I think it's a great product. I think it's fun to see how it kind of came out of someone in Veeam, in the home lab that out, right? And really put some love and energy in it. And now it's a product. And it's okay for the home lab. We have a physical object first box in our data center right now. I'm with Jonah. I would never deploy a Linux hardened repository at my work. And it's not that I don't trust it. is, yes, I know my way around Linux, but I'm not a Linux guru, right? I'm not. We don't have in my team anyone who's like sleep and breathe Linux all day long. So if there's a change needs to be made, it's almost walking raw eggs, right? So I think I understand what that change is, but if I'm wrong, it's all gone. With Object First, I don't care. It's not my problem. It just works. I cannot make many changes to it, but I don't have to really train people on it. Once it's set up, it's really a set and forget. And to Jonah's point, from being a small, medium-sized business, it is pricey for what it is, and the sizings. The box we have is a 64 terabytes box. We don't need 64 terabytes. I mean, I just don't. So I know Object First is working on this to have more suitable solutions for smaller businesses, and therefore bring the price down. On the other hand, I just got some quotes for some Dell storage, and not to throw shade on Dell storage, but I mean, it was a lot smaller storage for a good deal more. And that was not hardened. That was just a regular storage for Veeam, right? So we could talk about this also, like maybe Object First is not that expensive what you get at the end. But yes, we're looking forward to having this box replaced with some that fits our needs more. And I'm looking probably to 32, 40 terabyte storage, which I think will serve best for a lot of small to medium-sized businesses. But it solves their problem, right? They don't have the knowledge. They need immutable backups. They don't necessarily want to push that to a Wasabi, because they also might not have the download speeds they need. It's all great if I have it in the cloud, right? If it takes me 24 hours just to download the backups to restore them, well, my RTOs are gone. So they want to have it on site, so they have full access to it and can transfer it quickly, but they don't want to have the headache with Linux or other solutions that seem, I'm not going to say half-baked, but require a lot of manpower, right? It's the Linux world. Linux for free, you give it up with manpower in hours.
You do. And that's exactly right. So the customers that we're moving in, you're right. We price out Object First. You hit the nail on the head. We looked at Dell. Dell, I think, was double the price for half the storage by the time we were done. Not throwing shade, but that's where they were. And Object First was viable. If you're large enough where you have this kind of large SMB or enterprise, I think you're used to those price points. And I think it's religion at this point. If I'm a Dell guy, I'm a Dell guy. If I'm a NetApp guy, I'm a NetApp guy. I don't have to learn it. I can use it. Object First is scary for them because they're like, I have to learn something new, not realizing with the whole OOPB thing, you're in and done in 10, 20 minutes. Like that's it. It just works like that because it's so tightly hooked. But then it's this fear factor of, well, support contracts. And so we have to start changing their religion. When we move into Linux, I mean, something I want to bring up with this, and we have some really strong Linux talent on our team. I think I'm an expert, but sometimes I think I only play one on TV, so to speak, with Linux because it's been a good number of years, but really need to drive home. I'm sorry to say Linux Hardened Repository is very hardened. However, we have been able to easily circumvent and delete things that should not be deletable because we know our way in and out of Linux. Even if we're removing accounts and doing this and locking down grub menus and whatnot, and we're not even talking side loading, there are ways in which it can be done. So it's kind of, as I put it, it's kind of that whole like governance versus compliance mode when we're talking into S3. Do I want to be able to say super god admin can delete something versus no, nobody can? I really laying it back more towards the whole, listen, if you're in Linux, super god guy can delete it. Just be prepared. And honestly, I don't know that that's a bad thing because using the whole Veeam zip code, that's not going to be our only location. I don't care if my customer has 2 data centers or 50. I'm always back up, cross-pollinate, and get yourself tertiary outside of your environment. I don't care where you choose that S3 bucket and for what, because you just need to have that last thing to what you were talking about with those RPOs. You're so right. Like people that stuff it to S3 and they go, oh, just download it. That is just baloney. And that's all I can say. The reality is these people need to realize that your S3 storage exists for the day that essentially you're out of business. It's not a main backup thing. It is everything you have ever leveraged has gone to hell, and you are now in this meeting location of it's going to be down for a week. oh my God, we'd be out of business. Yeah, well, at least you retained some of your business. You can still do some things. That's why it exists. It is definitely not what people should be doing. So that's kind of where I am. And yeah, now you're talking patching, your upkeep, your firmware, your hardware, all of these things. Honestly, in our world, believe it or not, we don't use the Veeam ISOs for Linux hardened repository. Like, I get it's GUI, I get it works, but we'll get in there and we'll make sure that we're running LVM on those. So that way that we have more resilience within the Linux capabilities of itself, and we're building it out. Now, we're still following the best practice hardening and NTP servers and, syncing up to all the SecOp rules and everything like that. So now you're paying us a larger implementation fee. It could be 10, 15 hours, depending on the box. Well, you could be looking at, $3,000 to $5,000 in manpower up. I think it's a solid solution, but if I just built this for a customer and said, here you go, in a year, they're going to have to call back. So they'll substantially save on a Dell purchase that could be $90,000, an Object First that's maybe $60,000. I'm roughing this, a Linux hardened repository, you might go, well, that's only $20,000. That's great. Yeah, but now it's the management costs. And what happens when, Nico, you leave the bank and you knew how to do this and the next guy doesn't, or they lose the vendor contact. Suddenly you own a boat anchor. So I put my customers into them, but we're in regular relationship with different dev. It's not like some of the service providers or service partners, the vast, they jump in, they implement you, they go. We're kind of involved every day, and we're like fractional Veeam people. So we're in their change management. It's like we're on their staff. It makes sense. But for the most part, I'm leaning more and more towards Object First. What I hope to get out of Object First is exactly what you said. Smaller footprint, guys, a little more aggressive price points for those people. And I think we're going to see it kind of come through. So those doctors' offices, those medical centers, those dentists, those accounting firms that have 15 head counts and need something, it would be great to give them the appliance, because where are they right now? God's honest truth, they're doing Datto is kind of where they are, and that's just not a product anybody should ever be on. I will throw shade at them. So I think we've kind of traversed the world. What I like to do is kind of last thoughts for everybody. We'll throw it over to you, Nico, our guest. Last thoughts on anything, wrap-ups, comments, conclusions. Where do we find your blog again? Let us know. Those sorts of things.
All right. Well, we covered a lot here today. So first of all, my blog, it's easy to find. It's really my first and last name together. So nicostein.com. You find me on LinkedIn, a little bit on Twitter or X, Blue Sky. It's linked on my blog. So if you want to connect there, my DMs are open. I like to chat, like to talk shop all the time. A wrap up, since we talked about Udby and this hardened repository, I know it sounds like a broken record, but have immutable backups, people, please. Even if it's still in this hardened repository for free, it's better than nothing, because yes, it could be your last Hail Mary for your business. If that doesn't work, and there have been businesses out there, they never came back. And yes, you will get hit. That's what I told my board when I talked to them about cybersecurity. And I said, Nico, what are you doing to prevent us from getting ransomware? Like, there's nothing I can do to prevent us. What I'm really working on is how fast can we come back? Because no matter what I do, it's a numbers game. Eventually they will hit through. So yeah, be ready to come back when you get hit.
Good deal. Yeah, I like that. It's kind of like, I think of it's like picking a lock, and it's so random too. Like, people are just thinking that they have woken up this morning, they looked at Nico and said, we're going to get him. And it's just blasted. It's however you get it. It's randomized. They're not targeting people. Forget what you watch in Mission Impossible and whatnot. It's just, randomness. So Jonah, you've been on both sides of the cybersecurity world for a long time here. I'm sure as a service provider, you're probably looking at more ransomware recoveries than power outages these days. So what's your wrapping thoughts on everything we've talked today?
Yeah, we're good, not just for ransomware. We do have the occasion, hurricane hits Louisiana, someone needs a location to spin up, but you're right. It's increasingly ransomware, and the conversation I find myself having on almost every sales engagement, being one of the main engineering resources for the sales team at my company is, I tell potential customers and existing customers, the backup zip code says one immutable copy, but really it should be every copy that you can manage should be immutable, especially as you get closer and closer to your source production. Like in a perfect world, you'd have your local immutable backups, you'd get ransomed, unless there's some reason like, your insurance company or cybersecurity comes in and tapes everything off and says, you can't touch any of this, we need to do forensic analysis. You should be able to take those local backups and spin up as quickly and easily as possible, and they shouldn't be affected. In a perfect world, as a service provider, we're the people that you pay and hopefully never have to call, because if people have, and a couple of our customers have basically said, kind of like we alluded to with S3, if they're calling us, it's typically a resume generating event. Like it won't be them calling us, it'll be their replacements calling us.
It's very true. I think of it like insurance sales. A friend of mine was in insurance, and if I would walk in and say, this is what you should do for your DR solution, somebody goes, no, our budget's this number. And you're like, no, you really should do these things. They're like, no. You can tell that that person has never gone through an incident. Whereas when you deal with other companies or post, suddenly they have copious amounts of money to direct to this because they've gone through the pain point. And it's sad because how many people would go and put insurance on somebody, a death or tragic thing happens, they go to cash a policy and realize it's not as much as what they thought. And if they had a time machine, they'd go back and say, well, instead of my $50 a month, I would have given them $100 and I'd never have to deal with this. And I think that's the sad thing with DR is we have to sit there and go, I know I'm the guy that benefits from selling you this, at least on my side, professional services coverage, but I can't tell you we're going to save your business. And you can't ever look at it and go, I prepared enough and I'm done. There's always more preparation. And I will say this with your DR vendors, if you're using them, some of my customers after mine, we live in the world of doom and gloom. We are paid pessimists. We are telling you everything you've designed is terrible. We need to do more. And a lot of IT people kind of scoff and they're like, I have multi-layer snapshots and this and that and whatever. Well, if I've said there's another path, that means you take that path because that other path can die. That's the whole thing. You can never have too many backups. That's really what the zip code of Veeam is. That was the origin, was multiple copies. And where did we learn this? Us dinosaurs that were like, take floppy disk here to here and here and here and copy and go. And you go on these hard drives, you find all these copies. I mean, it was disjointed. It wasn't healthy, but it really did work if you had something stashed somewhere. And that's what we're doing is we're stashing backups and protecting them and walling them. So absolutely, like, we need to get on it. So I loved our podcast today. Nico, thank you for joining us. It was great having you on the show. Jonah, as always, great. For our listeners, check out nicostein.com. Check out cyberfortress.com for all your cloud service needs. They'll go ahead and give you that tertiary or secondary site for a low cost, and you'll get an amazing team of IT ninjas helping you out. If you have any questions regarding how do I get Veeam, how do I buy Veeam, how do I implement Veeam, more importantly, how do I run it month over month and not hire a very, very expensive engineer, contact Different Dev. Will help you out for a fraction of the cost and monitor you. We don't care if you're at Cyber Fortress or anywhere else. We actually integrate in with everybody. And I'll close off with Nico's kind of thoughts on audits. They're a thing. So be auditing your DR. Go ahead, give us a call for that as well. But gentlemen, thank you so much for attending today. Listeners, we're going to play you out with our cool little music and whatnot. So as always, stay in trouble, my friends.
Whether you're a seasoned solutionist or just starting out, the Rebel Devs podcast is a must listen. So join us. Comment, share, and subscribe. Be part of the Rebel Devs.